Okay, so this is the first meeting of the ad hoc parking committee. And we seem to have just two committee members here. But that's all right, because what we're really, this first meeting is just to sort of set the agenda for what we're going to do. Vicky, you're welcome to participate as well. I see you there. Margaret was going to join us, but she hasn't joined us yet.
Yeah, I just have to leave at 6:35 to take my daughter to the train, that's all.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to be long. Margaret was going to call in, as was Ryan. A little disappointing. Oh, Dominic, are you there? I can't hear. Dominic, you're muted. Dominic,
Can you hear me?
now we can.
I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. I couldn't make it in person. I got an allergy thing kicking in, so I
Yeah,
could fall
so-
asleep on Zoom with my Benadryl. It's not as embarrassing.
Yeah, everybody seems to be suffering today from allergies. So you're familiar with the study, right, Dominic?
Yes, yes.
So any ideas on what you'd like to see as the agenda for this committee?
Well,
start
I
with-
mean, there was a lot of information, but I think what I would like to see is kind of setting up, some kind of, parking, bureau, and then definitely hitting, head on with the parking meters thing, for either how to do it, obtaining funding, what it looks like to get it, where the parking study kind of said it should be. So those are the kind of things, because the long-term stuff, the authority and things like that, I mean, that's really down the road, of something, but I think something and under those lines to see what it looks like to do, what, parking, division, and then definitely the parking meters.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that was the strongest recommendation, either a bureau, a standalone bureau of some kind that would eventually perhaps create an authority, but concentrating everything in one person, because it's way too spread out. That was clearly a major recommendation of the study. I participated in a planning board meeting recently and got some pushback because I suggested that they really hadn't studied the study. But I think one of the recommendations from the man who did the study was that this is in constant change. You know what I mean? It doesn't, I think that's Margaret just joined us. That this is, you got to keep redoing the numbers. Because even though at the time of his study, we're not at capacity yet, that could easily happen, especially with all the projects. At the same time, not every project's going to make it to the end, or to the end zone, if you prefer a sports metaphor. Not all are going to happen. So yeah, it's important to plan in light of the potential that all these things are going to happen, but also to remember that some of them won't, as well as the ones that do. So you got to be constantly changing your data when it comes to this parking. Margaret, are you there? Vicky, did you want to say something?
Yes, I watched the whole study, the parking study, and I have to say a very important thing to do is have this authority or bureau, the parking bureau, but not to be consistent just from us, the elected officials. I really think we should have people from the public, maybe be a good group of, 6, 8 people that can help us with this.
Well, I think when you have an authority, we'd have to check with the attorneys. When you have an authority, I think you can do that. For the Bureau at this point, it's not clear how it would have to. You can't, one of the principles of municipal government is you can't sort of change powers without a referendum. In other words, if there's a group that has a designated power by charter, you can't just willy-nilly change that. You have to, go through a referendum and, so we have to find out how and I'll ask Crystal, how to even establish a bureau that would, could have a single person, in charge of it without taking away, from all the different people who have some say in parking at the present. I mean, that's gonna be a tough haul to get that done. Because I don't think it's immediately obvious how you do it. Margaret, can you hear us now? Sure, but
Looks like she's connected to Dawn.
yeah. Oh, okay. You get better eyesight than I do. Oh, I can read it now. So, does that make sense, Vicky?
Yes, it does. And I think the man doing the presentation, his name's, I think, is John. He did. Margaret, are you okay?
No, she's not okay, actually. That's why she's not here tonight. Has a really bad bronchial cough.
I'm sorry to hear.
Uh,
Yeah, so he suggested to have some people from the public too. I feel our government has a lot of criticism through the years, and it would be good if we have some, other people come and give their ideas too. That's all.
I've tried to do that over the course of my tenure here, to get more people involved in various committees, and it's worked to a certain extent.
Mhm.
When we had, at one point, the youth committee had a lot of outside participation. We can reinstate, now that the pandemic is kind of sort of over, we can sort of reinstate some of the more traditional committees if that's what the council would like to see. On the other hand, there's non-voting members on the truck route committee.
Mhm.
And that would be sort of a model for how to do it. In other words, they can even be other politicians from the city, but they wouldn't be able to vote. And voting is not, that's another thing, if you have a committee, like say we had a parking bureau of some kind, the question of how what they recommend gets implemented would have to be determined as well, I don't think they could have the authority to actually create, say, a law or anything.
Come to us.
Yeah, you'd have to bring it through us.
I agree, yeah.
So
And it's kind of like, what's that parking bureau kind of look like? Does it then have a commissioner attached to it? So yeah, I think, I'm gonna if I get a chance, I'm gonna just kind of research some other smaller versions like our city and how that, works, like in Troy and things like that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll have Crystal working on it too. But that's good, to find other authorities or bureaus, depending on which way we want to go, and figuring out how they function in terms of the rest of city government. Because it's clear we need to concentrate the various what's the word I'm looking for, various things that happen under parking, that fall under parking, everything, as you said, meters, to of course.
Revenue, maintenance. I mean, there's a lot of things that, right now there's, some gaps with, so, the more we increase our maintenance and our repairs, our revenue is going to go up. And once we bring our revenue into our 21st century, in terms of our technology, that's totally going to be a little bit more consistent revenue through parking.
Right, and that was one of the recommendations in the study was that the revenue that comes in from parking should go towards parking. You know, rather than the rest of, and that's, I think, having, you know, been involved with the budget for all these years now, that's not as impossible as it might seem. We don't necessarily rely on all that revenue from parking to do a lot of things that we do. Because of course,
It's
If we-
inconsistent.
excuse me?
Well, that funding's inconsistent. It's hard to kind of, put our eggs in one basket on parking and to depend on it when it's not a consistent stream right now.
When it's inconsistent and it's not even clear because the expenses for parking are kind of divvied up in various ways, you know what I mean? It's not like, you know, some goes to DPW, some goes to the police, to the police department for paying the meter guys. So, you know, you have it all spread out. And I think that was John's point in the study is that that's a bad model, because you never really know exactly what you have and what you can fund and how to fund it. Ronnie, since you're right here, any thoughts?
You know, the things you said definitely are, should be our guiding principles for the parking committee and the potential for a parking bureau. You know, from my own personal point of view, I've always thought of Hudson as like a, wonderful city that was built to be a walking city that, kind of got hijacked in the 60s or 70s when car culture kind of took over. And I, even I suffer from that where, 2 blocks down, I'll take my car instead of just walking sometimes. So I think one of the things that even the parking study kind of pointed out in one of the slides, this is,
Oh, look at you, you got the whole study right there.
yeah, slide 29, I think, or something like that. It says reduce parking demand. So I think that's something that we need to work towards as, one of the ways of cutting out the issue of parking demand is to reduce it by, obviously, we can't do it by a regulatory means, but we can incentivize it how, by trying to advertise and make more attractive available municipal parkings. We could work with the businesses that bring in a lot of the, the visitors to the town where they're incentivized, they could give out some sort of like a discount or like a free coffee or something if you park at the municipal parking lot and walk over. Or, or you can also try to, this is, kind of building castles in the sky situation, but it would be nice if we can have the Hudson trolley or something of that sense back on the roads where it is a very touristy destination. If we have something that is historical, like the trolley on the road, people would probably just jump on that and go down the street instead of getting on their car.
Right, even if it just operated at the most dense times,
Right,
like
Fridays
Friday
and
night and Saturday and part of Sunday.
So these are, obviously, these are all dependent on budgeting constraints, but we are getting money from parking. If we can feed that back into the system of alleviating traffic.
If we look at the changing the meter system as like goal number one, I think that would feed into some of these things, because as you say, you can incentivize parking by encouraging people to use the existing lots. And I think with an app system, someone could easily demonstrate that to a business. And or in the reverse, that it's free if they somehow go into a store, buy something in a store, and then somehow whatever, I don't know how these things work, but you know what I mean? You could probably do it that way too.
Yeah, because, most of these businesses are drawing crowds kind of in an off business, like not regular business hours. So therefore, it wouldn't really compete with people that are coming into the city for working. So, like after, like from between 5 to 9, you incentivize free parking on those parking. I mean, it is kind of free already, right? So you just have to advertise it. Kamal did a great job with using the videos on the website, and that could be one video that we have that, hey, we have, this is a walkable city, park in these areas, taking the views on the way to your destination. Take the trolley and experience.
Well, the parking, I mean, the planning board struggles with this. Because, you know, as I said earlier, it's never clear what's actually gonna get developed and when. They have to think about capacity in an almost theoretical way, you know what I mean, because they don't have the exact numbers of what's gonna happen. But I know they're very hot on the shuttle idea.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there is the parking out there.
Yeah.
And granted, I mean, one recent applicant approached city center. But you know, you can't just kind of like write an email. You gotta really deal with the people who own the place and find out, because I'm not sure they pointed out some kind of liability issue, but I'm not sure that's as difficult to overcome as it might seem to some, you know what I mean? But as you said, we can incentive, and this was also in the study, somehow figure out how to activate as well as incentivize some of these private lots to be available, even if it's only on weekends, you know, when they're, or after hours when they're not in service. I mean, I know on Union Street, a lot of the private lots are really strictly 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge one behind the pediatric building, really big lot. And it may have some Saturday afternoon or early, I don't even know what their hours are, but I know that in the evening that those lots are empty. And of course, mental health lot is empty for a lot of the time too. You know, they've both been kind of resistant to renting it out, but I think something could be worked out if we approach them. If we had a parking bureau to approach, you know, it is, I think this question of concentration is really crucial. To have somebody who speaks for the whole thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think another portion of that would be if we activate this, or we would have to kind of work in conjunction with the businesses that are bringing in the traffic.
Yeah.
Or the future businesses that want to apply for zoning or permission from the planning board, where the planning board recommends like. We're not going to limit your project based on the parking thing, as long as you. Have written policies in place that incentivize using these municipal.
That is kind of, I think what the planning board tries to do. Sometimes they need help. I mean, problem is sometimes they get very anecdotal and they start talking about their own parking problems, you know? It's like, yeah, if you live on Allen Street, you got a parking problem.
Right.
Everybody knows that. And there's like, what are you gonna do? You could theoretically park down near the river and walk, but you know, nobody wants to walk that far for where they live. I mean, it's just the story down there really would have to be greater activation of the alleyways, because that's really their only open spots.
I mean, I think we can alleviate some of the concerns of, residents as well as, employees, because those are the two groups that want parking that's really close to their house. If we also have some sort of a zoning, not a zoning, but like a parking district situation where if you live in this street, you can park here without any concerns from this time to this time.
Right.
During these days. And, those are only reserved for that. So visitors are, not only incentivized to park in these local, central points, but they're disincentivized from parking in these residential areas. And that would probably go a long way to kind of convince.
Yeah, well, there have been efforts to think about doing that, and it's apparently a complex thing to do.
Right.
But that's not to say it's not doable.
That's what most majors,
Yeah.
cities and especially tourist destinations like, go to like Great Barrington or
Yeah,
the smaller cities that have similar issues like us.
right,
That's what they do. Cause that would go, cause most of the complaints are coming from residents. They're like, oh, well, all these people are coming in and we can't even find parking.
right.
Near our
Outside
houses.
of our house.
Right.
I did, at the last planning board meeting, I said, in terms of businesses, it's like, if you think you're gonna park in front of the place you wanna go shopping anymore, forget about it.
No,
That's over.
Right.
But still, I mean, people would like to, at night, be able to park relatively close to where they live.
But it's a lot, like I said, it's the same thing. It's a lot easier to say, hey, there is an alternative we're working on, Don't complain about not being able to park here because we're trying to fix it.
Yeah,
And this is the ways we're fixing it.
yeah. I know, Margaret, you're not feeling well. Do you wanna contribute anything to this? Through the
No,
telephone?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm just wheezing away. I'm listening.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
We just
no, so one of the things like, one of the things that I have thought about, within Hudson, is the possibility of, assigning, permits for individuals who live in a particular area, so that we could maybe establish areas where this is resident parking
Mhm.
and areas where it's not resident parking.
Right,
It's just an idea to think about. I have very good friends in Philadelphia, and there were various streets, and this block, that block. You have to be a resident to park there. I think it's something for us to think about. I haven't really thought it through that much, but I think that in the more densely populated areas of Hudson, I think it might be a good thing to
Mhm.
think about something like that, where we have permits for people who actually live in the densely populated blocks, where they have a tag, they can park there, and that parking is restricted to people who have a tag. It's just a thought.
Yes, and it has been thought of before, and I remember there were some obstacles, but we can revisit it, just as I mean, my feeling is that one of the results of the study is that we need to revisit these things constantly, it's not like we're gonna find a one-time solution that's gonna work for the rest of the time. Things change,
Yeah, we just have to think of it as a hurdle rather than a roadblock.
yeah, thank you, Margaret.
But
Glad you-
the problem with that, Tom, is that, like, as I'm thinking, the scenario I'm thinking about is, I have a lot of good friends in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a major city. Hudson is a 2 square mile couple of blocks. So that makes it a little bit more tricky. So I'm not sure how well it would work.
Right,
But I do think that there are a lot of people there are people in Hudson who struggle to find parking near where they live. And it's something for us to think about. How do we make it possible for people to be able, who don't have off-street parking,
right,
to be able to park near their homes and live their lives? And that we need to think about that.
yep, without a doubt.
It's not easy. I'm going to mute myself now, Tom.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if we have a lot more to discuss other than, oh, Vicky, please.
Yes, so I feel the city is losing money every day with the meters we have. We need to find funding for these mobile QR units
Yeah,
and figure out how to do this, because I brought guests, I had guests over last weekend. I brought them to the city and so in Hudson, and they all wanted to shop, and we only had that hour. We parked in the municipal, and they're like, where are those, the QR? I was like, well, we don't have them. And I realized how we spend less money because we had to go back, and then they didn't want to go back shopping. And I feel what I went through, a lot of tourists probably go through. So the city is we're losing money, so I feel if we can make that a priority, it would be beneficial for all of us,
agree with you 100%, and I'm trying to make that a priority. And as I've said it, I think at other meetings, I'm hoping that we can find funding. John Foster, who worked on the plan, is willing to help us with the meter replacement system. We're recommending, because we have to get 3 different proposals and then decide exactly what we want. And the QR, as he said, the QR system is the up-to-date system. with fewer kiosks, but you still have some kiosks. And you still have, you know, multiple ways you can pay. And, you know, it would be much easier, it'll be very easy to do in the lots, because you just need obviously the one kiosk. The other thing, of course, he recommended was striping all the way down to the Front Street and all the way up to Worth, which seems about right. I mean, it's, you know, you go one block and suddenly everything's free. I mean, it does, you know, it's not just a question of raising revenue, but of making it a fairer system.
Yeah,
for
I
bargaining.
think it wouldn't be too crazy to even up the pricing a little bit.
Yeah, oh, well, he said that too.
Yeah.
We're still way too low.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and the thing is, when you have this app based, it's a lot easier to change things, like say if you had a weekend rate versus a Monday and Tuesday rate. I mean, he was saying maybe you can get free on Monday and Tuesday, because that really just benefits locals.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of out of town people on Monday and Tuesday. But you know, you could do that even if it's just a minimal fee instead of something, but the point is with an app, with this kind of internet app-based thing, you can do a lot more variation.
Right.
So that's another,
Tom?
yes. Margaret,
With regard to paying the methodology where you come to a space and you pay,
Mhm.
and then you know this application and you pay and you leave. The huge revenue impact of that is that if I pull into a parking space and there's still 30 minutes on the meter, I don't have to pay because somebody else already paid. But if you go with the electronic situation, my car has to pay
Yeah.
regardless of whether somebody, that is the big advantage of that.
I forgot that.
So that's right. I mean, that is the completely brilliant aspect of that. Whoever came up with that was a genius,
Well, thanks.
because there's no free parking.
Right.
But to come back to what I was saying before about people being able to park and live where they live. From my perspective, with regard to parking in Hudson, I am much more concerned. I'm less concerned about revenue and actually more concerned about people living in Hudson being able to park where they live in a reasonable way so that they can get home, blah, 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 and not have to pay parking fees because
Right.
they don't have off. To me, for me personally, I am more concerned about that than in generating revenue. To be honest, that's where I'm coming from. Just
No,
saying
I
that.
agree with you. I agree with you totally. And, you know, it would be unfair not to address that issue because there is that, I mean, we identified West Allen Street. The western part of Allen Street as a tough place to park. Can you think of other places where people who live there have a hard time parking?
Like Kin Street Place.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, Tom? I didn't quite catch.
Yes, and then I'll tell you what Linda pointed out, which is correct. But neighborhoods where residents have hard times parking. And I said, West Allen is the obvious one. Linda pointed out McKin Street is difficult as well. Although I think there's some off-street parking there, but no, actually, if you're going down the hill on the right-hand side, I think the first one or two buildings have parking and none all the way down. And on the left side, I don't think there's much parking at all. And then, of course, during the day, they compete with the hospital parking.
Even my block, 200 block.
But you know, I think we have two problems here. One of which is people who live in Hudson need to be able to park. Like not everybody has off. I'm fortunate I have off-street parking. Not everybody does. People who live in Hudson need to be able to park where they live, and then we need to address parking for people who are visiting Hudson as a
Right.
separate issue.
Absolutely. And that's, it's definitely a separate issue and
And,
then
and,
you-
and Tom,
Yes.
that's why I was saying the idea of having some kind of permit
right,
for people who actually live in Hudson. So you have
Right.
a tag, and you could park your car somewhere with your tag, and you're not going to have to pay anything. But if you don't have a tag, yes, you do have to pay something.
my vague recollection of talking about permits in the past was that it may have to go somehow through the state to get permission. But that doesn't mean,
Yeah.
again, you can't do it, you know?
Yeah.
So two of the things that I hope to have in place by our next meeting is one, talking to Crystal about establishing a bureau or authority. Two, get her to look into the permit system, and then talk to John, the fellow who did the study, about moving forward with our parking meter renovation. Does that sound like a plan, to you guys, folks, women, everyone?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all we need. Dominic, you have any final words for us?
No, I like your course of action, and I also, in off note, I do like your thought about going back to, committees. I think that might be, that's just off the cuff. You mentioned going back to our standing committees. I think that might, maybe not the full blown, but I think there's some positive things in that realm.
There
Just a
are.
side note.
I gotta tell you, though, I do like having our reports concentrated, but maybe we'll figure out some mix. Depending on what the council wants. Okay, I
Right.
guess that's it, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
As
Bye-bye.
always. Bye, Vicky. Okay, now. Yeah.